Hi, I'm Dan Parent, and I'm an artist and writer for Archie Comics, and I'm going to draw two of my favorite girls, Betty and Veronica. And I don't use anything fancy as far as pencils go. I use just a regular drugstore mechanical pencil, $2, nothing fancy. Really, with Betty and Veronica, it's all about, capturing their personalities every time. Betty, as you'll see, I always put her usually in t-shirts and jeans, that kind of stuff, and Veronica is much more of a fashion plate, so she'll be a little more dressed up. But I just, focus on keeping the expressions, keeping them pretty. A lot of people think, their faces are exactly the same, which technically they are. But when I'm drawing them, I don't really see it that way because I always, they have different expressions, so I don't, even though it's a similar template, I always think that I'm drawing them two different girls. Dan DeCarlo used to say the same thing too, even though there was always they had always the same identical faces. He thought he didn't see it that way. People who are used to drawing with a lot of detail tend to put a little bit too much detail into the Archie characters' faces, which sort of changes them. So there's just the certain amount of detail you want to put in. Like, if you put in too many lines in their face or too many lines across their nose, it starts to change them. So it's a formula that you just get used to because I've done it so many times. So once I get it sort of loosely sketched out, I know how I've got it sort of where I want it to be. Now I'll just go in and I'll just do a tighter version in pencil. So even though Betty and Veronica, again, have similar faces, and to everyone else they look exactly the same, the difference with Veronica, there's a little more of an arch to her eyebrows. She has a little bit more of a kind of a sneaky smile, and that's sort of what differentiates Betty and Veronica to me when I'm drawing them. And if you watch Riverdale, Veronica is always wearing pearls in Riverdale, so it's one of those things I've been starting to do in the comics as I like it. It kind of suits Veronica's personality, so I tend to put her wearing pearls a lot in my drawings now. So the next step will be I'll be inking it in, and I'll go over it with just a regular India ink, kind of like a flat marker and then I'll go over it with a brush pen after that. Again, these are just basic Pitt pens. You get them at I order them online. You get them at craft stores and things like that. But they're Pitt artist pens, and they're real black India ink. So it's sort of a shortcut from a long time ago. We'd always ink with the bottle of ink and the brush, and the pen. This is sort of a modernized version of that. It's a little easier, a little more convenient. A lot of it is a lot of anatomy is tough for new artists because, again, the anatomy on the characters is pretty realistic. So if you make their heads too big and you make their bodies too small, they look a little too cartoony. But at the same time, they're not as many heads tall as superhero characters. So it's, again, that sort of in-between balance of getting the character's anatomy correct. I see that's probably the toughest thing. And the thing that they really used to look at a lot when I started was the faces. It always, the faces were always the most important thing because there's a lot of close-ups in Archie Comics and expressions are really important. And that was always I was always like probably strongest with faces, and I think that was one of the things that kind of got me in the door there. So that's another thing that they really look at. And again, you know, with the simplicity of the lines, you know, like I can do like a little like line like that, gives them a little contour on their face. But sometimes when people are starting out and they try and put little lines and details, one little line can like age a character like this quite a bit. So you got to be really, really careful. Betty and Veronica and Wonder Woman seems like a natural to me. Supergirl would be a great team up for Betty and Veronica. Plus, Supergirl is also on the CW, and Riverdale is on the CW, so it's not that far out of the realm of possibilities. And the fact that we work with DC too, so yeah, there's endless, you know, crossovers that we could do. Veronica has the famous hair squiggles. People always like wonder what those are. Those are like the reflections in her hair. And anybody who's familiar with Archie for the years, when they look at Veronica and all the old stories, and the new stories, she has those blue squiggles in her hair. So I've got the thin ink lines down, so I'm going to go in with a brush pen now. Fill all that in. When I'm working on a cover, it usually starts out with either I do a rough sketch or they give me a sketch that someone else has done. And when I do a cover, basically what you see here, I take the idea and I pencil it out, ink it myself. And then I'll take it and I'll scan it to the computer, where I will clean it up in Photoshop, like taking out all the like little extra lines and cleaning it, and I'll color it in Photoshop and create a file in Photoshop and then send it off digitally to Archie. Where in the old days, I'd just send in the black and white art and they would take care of it. I do the coloring at home and on my computer, and I just send in the digital file. So the original art basically stays with me. And it takes probably, I mean, from beginning to end, a cover could take 5 or 6 hours, depending on the amount of detail. Could be, you know, like a day's work, half a day's work. Really depends on the detail of what's on the cover. Some lines I go over them with the brush to make them thicker. Some lines, like the little lines in her face and the lips, and I leave those with the thin line that I did before. Go and I will, with the kneaded eraser, I'll get rid of all the pencil lines. And then I'm just going to fill in a couple blacks after that, like the blacks in her hair, any like little parts of their clothing that might have blacks. But yeah, this is just about the final stage. I am Dan Parent, and this is Betty and Veronica.